So here we have a golden china Famiclone. This was one of many Famiclones around in the 90s, and I got it from eBay. It said it was untested. But as is the case with many of these untested consoles, there are faults here that are quite apparent. So the on and off switch works, but the reset switch is most definitely busted. If we have a look at the front of the console, we have our controller ports, which look okay visually. And if we just turn it around and take a look at the back, there's a 9-volt power jack input. There's an audio and video composite output with only one audio cable given that's mono, and then we have this little RF output, which I don't want to use if possible because you tend not to get the best picture with that kind of output. Oh, and we also have this rattle here, and that comes from this eject lever inside the console which has been broken off. So here you can see that's the little eject thing, and it seems to be loose inside. So let's crack it open and take a look inside. Usually I'll test the console before opening it, but I haven't tested it yet because I don't know if the power supply is meant to be center pin negative or center pin positive, and I might do damage to the console if I get it the wrong way round. So hopefully by opening it I can find that out. There we are. Goodness, that is dusty. So first things first, let's get rid of that dust. So this here is the reset switch, and it doesn't click in, it's busted. So I'm definitely going to need to replace that. We also have here what looks like a bad capacitor. It's a bit hard to see on camera, but that top is bulging a little bit, which suggests that this capacitor is no good. And I'm afraid it gets worse from there. If we take a look underneath that capacitor, the bottom is also falling out. Again, it's hard to see on camera, but once I remove it from the board, you'll be able to see it a bit better. But before we fix anything, let's find out if the power supply is center pin negative or center pin positive. To do this, I'll just take a quick look at that dodgy capacitor, and I can find out which leg is negative by that stripe along the side. Whichever leg is closest to that stripe is the negative leg. Then I turn the board over and have a quick look, and I can see that the positive leg of that capacitor is connecting to this part of the power jack. So whatever part of the power jack that is, that's the positive part. So I turn my meter to continuity mode, and I touch the part of the power jack that corresponds to the inside pin, and I can see that relates to this part of the board just here. I then touch the part of the power jack that comes into contact with the outside barrel of the connector, and that relates to this part which connects to the positive lead of the capacitor, which suggests to me that the power supply is center pin negative and positive on the outside. Now the only plug that I've got is actually center pin positive, so I've done this dodgy wiring job to switch the polarity of the power supply there. And switching it on, we can see we have no signal. So as a first step, let's get to work replacing that dodgy capacitor and reset switch. Okay, I think that's just about ready to come out. So I can give you a close look at that capacitor now, and you can see it is completely busted. That's definitely broken. I'm just going to check it on my capacitance meter here. Now this capacitor is rated at 470 microfarad, and if it's working it should be within a tolerance of about 10%. So 10% lower or 10% higher than that value should be fine. Anything outside of that means that it's not working correctly. And we have a value of about 10 microfarad. Now I haven't done the calculations yet, but I think that might just be outside the 10% range we're looking for. So now we know that capacitor is definitely busted. I set about replacing it with another capacitor of exactly the same value. The next step was replacing that busted reset switch. And I'll just do a quick continuity test to make sure everything is the right way round. So I'm just testing continuity as I'm pressing the switch. And that all seems to be working just fine. So as I was working on the board, I noticed something else. Take a look at this. All looks fine from the top, but let me give you another angle. See how the solder is just completely lifted off from that part of the power jack. That's the center pin of the power jack is not connected to the board. So I'll just do a quick continuity check to make sure, and sure enough, it's not making contact with the board. So now I'll just do a quick solder job to reconnect that part of the power, and that's probably the main reason why we weren't getting a signal on the TV. It wasn't actually powering on. Now let's recheck that connection in continuity mode just to make sure. Okay, so this is test number 2. Let's see what happens. Well, that's better than before. At least we're getting an image on the screen. So then I turn the console off and turn it back on again, and I got a purple screen. Now I'm not sure if that's a great sign, but it's better than nothing. At least it's doing something. Then I decided to take off the cartridge cover and just wiggle the board about a bit, hoping that if there is a loose connection there, we might see a change in the image on screen. But I had no luck there. I also got a grey screen as well as a purple one. So I googled it and I found the NES can get this thing called a grey screen of death. And that can be caused for many reasons. It could be a faulty chip. It could be that the cartridge is not making proper contact with the cartridge slot. So I managed to find the pinout for this chip used in this golden China Famiclone. So the first thing I did was check that we were getting 5 volts on the pins that we were meant to be getting 5 volts on, and that the ground pins were actually grounding. So this all checked out fine. And so the next thing I did was check we were getting continuity between each of the pins and the traces on the board. And there were no problems there either. So then I turned my attention to the cartridge slot. So then I did a simple continuity test between the cartridge and the pins soldered to the board. And I did find that actually some of them didn't seem to be connecting properly. So then it was the painstaking task of trying to bend those pins forward to make sure they were making proper contact. I also gave the cartridge contacts a good scrub with my toothbrush covered in isopropyl alcohol. I thought while I was at it, I might as well do the board as well. And the connections on the back. And of course I scrubbed the contacts on the cartridge too. So this is the third test and it's looking better than it ever did. You can see the colours are changing on screen as I'm pressing the reset button. So there is the grey screen of death that I received before. And it seems to have stopped changing. But that's a good sign. It means that it's possibly the contacts on that cartridge. So I had a hunch that I might have isolated the issue to a bad cartridge connection. So I started prying my screwdriver, pushing those pins forward to see if I can make a better connection. Oh, I don't believe it. It's working. Yes. So it looked like it was a cartridge slot issue in addition to all the other things, the capacitor, the faulty power connection and reset switch. So I'm now just having a little play. It's playing just fine. The controller feels like garbage, but it's actually all working. But as you can see, the picture isn't 100%. We have some rolling static on screen. So I did some Googling and I found out this rolling static could possibly be caused by a bad power supply. And to be honest, given what I had to do to get the power supply to work, I'm not surprised that the power supply is probably the issue in this case. So then as some final touches, I did a 3D print of the missing eject switch that goes on top and of the cartridge cover, which was also missing from this Famiclone. I did it in white just because I don't have a red filament and it wasn't worth purchasing it just for this project. The eject button seemed to snap in fine, it just was a bit tight, but a bit of filing soon sorted that out. And then it was just a case of putting everything back together as it was. And so there we are, and you can see the eject switch is now sliding properly and I have a cartridge cover. And I haven't shown you the controller, but this is the controller too. It doesn't feel great, it feels pretty cheap and nasty. But it works, which is the main thing. So now the question is, was it worth it, repairing this old Famiclone? Well, it probably doesn't have a whole lot of monetary value, but I did get a lot of enjoyment out of fixing this one and its multiple problems. And I hope you did too. So from that perspective, it was worth every second. Remember, if you like this video, to give it a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed already, you might also want to consider subscribing if this content is your kind of thing. As always, thanks for watching, take care, and I hope to see you next time.